Some web applications use OAuth authentication to allow the users to log in with their social media account. During this video, we see how insecure configuration of OAuth would put users' data at risk and lead to account takeover. For the purpose of this exercise, we use a lab from Web Security Academy, and you can find the link to this lab in the video description. This lab allows the users to attach a social media profile to their account so that they can log in via OAuth. Due to the insecure implementation of the OAuth flow, an attacker can manipulate the attached social media profile functionality to get access to other users' accounts. So to solve this lab, we need to perform a CSRF attack to attach our own social media profile to an admin user account on the blog website, then get access to the admin panel and delete user call-list. The lab description provides credentials for a blog website account and also a social media profile that we can use to log in into our account. Alright, let's jump in and get started by clicking on Access the Lab. We are now in the homepage of the blog website. We click on My Account link. There are two options for users to log in into their account. The first option is to log in directly using a blog website account, and the other option is to log in via a social media account. Let's just use the first option to log in into our account. So we fill out the username and password fields with the blog website account credentials that we got from lab description and proceed to log in. In the My Account page, we see some information about our account, such as the username, email address, API key, and also the user role. The user role is normal, so we are not an admin user. We notice the social media profile username is blank, and it's because we haven't yet attached our social media profile to our blog website account. To review the Attach a Social Profile functionality, let's go ahead and attach our own social media profile to our blog website account. Looking at the URL in the web browser address bar, we notice that we have been redirected to the social media login page. So we fill out the username and password fields with the social account credentials that we got from lab description and proceed to sign in. Now the social media website is informing us that the blog application has requested to access our profile and email. To approve this request and allow the social media website to share the requested data with the blog website, we click on Continue. If we look at the URL in the address bar, we notice that we have been redirected back to the blog website, and we also see the message that we successfully linked our social media account to our blog website account. Let's click on Continue. Now that we have attached the social media profile to the blog website account, we can see our social media profile username in the My Account page. Now let's go to Burp HTTP history to review the OAuth flow and the corresponding HTTP messages between the client application and the OAuth service provider for attaching the social media profile to the user account on the blog website. Whenever we want to review the OAuth flow, first we need to look out for the authorization request, where the client application redirects the user to the OAuth service provider. Then look out for the HTTP request to the callback endpoint, where the OAuth service redirects the user back to the client application. The authorization request is the HTTP request that initiates the OAuth flow. Identifying this request is relatively easy. It's an HTTP GET request to the OAuth service authorization endpoint, and it contains a number of URL parameters such as client ID. In this lab, the client application is the blog website and the OAuth service provider is the social media website. So based on what we discussed, this is the authorization request. As we see, this is a GET HTTP request to the auth endpoint of the social media website, and it contains a number of URL parameters. Now let's find the second request that we are looking for, which is the request to the blog website callback endpoint. The redirect URL parameter in the authorization request contains the callback URL, and as we see, it is the URL to the OAuth linking endpoint of the blog website. So this is the HTTP request to the callback endpoint, where the social media redirects the user back to the blog website along with the authorization code in the URL parameter. The other HTTP message between these two highlighted requests are related to the user interaction with the social media website when the user logs in into his social media account and approves giving access to the list of data that the blog website wants to access. Alright, so far we have identified the authorization request that initiates the OAuth flow and also the request to the callback endpoint which completes the OAuth flow for attaching social media profile to user account on the blog website. Now let's see if we can identify a misconfiguration in the OAuth flow implementation that might allow us to manipulate the attach a social profile functionality and get access to another user account. So let's take a look at the authorization request. As I said before, this is a request to /auth endpoint of the social media website, and it contains a number of URL parameters. The client ID contains the unique ID of the blog website. The redirect URI value is the URL to which the user browser will be redirected when the social media website sends the authorization code to the blog website. The next parameter is response type, and its value is code, which means the blog website is initiating the authorization code grant type. Finally, the last parameter is a scope that specifies the set of users' data on the social media that the blog website wants to access, and in this case is profile and email. Alright, now that we have reviewed all parameters in the authorization request, we notice one important parameter is missing, and that's the state parameter. So what is the state parameter? In the OAuth flow, the state parameter serves as a form of CSRF token. When the client application initiates the OAuth flow, it should set the state parameter in the authorization request, and the OAuth service provider should return the exact value in the HTTP request to the client application callback endpoint along with the authorization code. Therefore, using the state parameter helps the client application to ensure that the GET request to the callback endpoint is from the same person who initiated the OAuth flow. Since the blog website is not using the state parameter in the authorization request, this leaves the OAuth flow for attaching the social profile function vulnerable to CSRF attack. But how do we manipulate the attach a social profile function and perform a CSRF attack to attach our social profile to a user account on the blog website and hijack the victim user account? First, we need to initiate the OAuth flow for attaching the social profile. Once we receive the valid authorization code from the social media website, then we need to trick the victim user to make the HTTP request to the blog website OAuth linking endpoint containing the authorization code that belongs to our social media profile. So the victim user will complete the OAuth flow on our behalf, and our social media profile will be attached to the victim user account on the blog website. Alright, let's first turn on burp intercept. Then in my account page, once again we click on attach a social profile. In burp, we see the authorization request to /auth endpoint of the social media website, which doesn't have the state parameter. Since we still have a valid session with the social media website, we shouldn't be redirected to the login page. Instead, we should receive the authorization code straight away. Let's forward the request. As we see, we get a redirection HTTP response code. And by looking at the location header, we see the browser has been redirected to the blog website OAuth linking endpoint, and it contains the authorization code in the URL parameter. So we have initiated the OAuth flow for attaching social profile to a blog website account, and we have received the valid authorization code. It's important to note, since this URL contains an authorization code that belongs to our social media profile, if someone visits this URL, his account on the blog website will be attached to our social media profile. Alright, we copy this URL, and to ensure the authorization code stays valid, we drop the response. Then we turn off burp intercept, and in the browser, we go back to my account page and proceed to log out of our account. From top of the web page, we click on exploit server. We use the exploit server for delivering the CSRF attack and trick the victim user to make the HTTP request to the blog website callback endpoint that contains our authorization code. The exploit server has a public URL, and whenever someone visits this URL, the following response will be loaded in his web browser. So in the body of the response, we need an HTML element or a simple JavaScript code that can automatically issue an HTTP request to the blog website callback endpoint when a victim user visits the exploit server URL. To keep it simple, let's just use an img tag and set the src attribute to the URL that we copied from burp. Then we store the exploit. Now if a user browses to the exploit server URL while he is logged in into his blog website account, the img tag will automatically make an HTTP request to the URL in the src attribute, and it will complete the OAuth flow. Therefore, our social profile will be attached to his blog website account. Based on the lab description, there is an admin user on the blog website who would open anything that we send from the exploit server. And this admin user always have an active session on the blog website. So we just click on deliver exploit to victim. Now let's check if the admin user has visited the exploit server URL and our social profile has been attached to his account. In the web browser, we click on My Account link. This time, we click on Login with social media. Once we are logged in, we go to My Account page. As we see, our username is administrator and we notice the role is admin. So we managed to successfully deliver the CSRF attack and attach our social media profile to the admin user on the blog website. There is one last thing that we need to do to solve this lab, and it's deleting user Carlos. So we go to admin panel. Then from the list of the users, we delete Carlos. Now we get the message that we solved the lab. So this was a simple scenario to show how insecure implementation of OAuth authentication by a client application can lead to account takeover. Thanks for taking the time and watching this video, and I'll see you in the next videos.